I was watching a friend of mine the other night. It was past midnight, and the room was pitch black, save for the artificial blue glow of a smartphone hovering over his face. He wasn't even really looking at the screen anymore. His thumb was just doing this rhythmic, zombie-like scroll. Suddenly, he tossed the phone onto the mattress, rubbed his eyes aggressively, and groaned, "I am actual garbage." He started listing off everything he didn't do that day. Didn't hit the gym, didn't finish the project, didn't read that book. He was dissecting his own failure with surgical precision. But what was fascinating, and honestly kind of tragic, was his immediate reaction to that guilt. He decided that because today was a 0, tomorrow had to be 100. He started mapping out this impossible Navy SEAL-style schedule for the next morning to make up for the lost time. He was trying to pay off a debt of laziness with a currency of motivation he simply didn't have. It was a setup for failure before the sun even came up. It made me realize that the heavy, sinking feeling we get at 11:59 p.m. isn't just about lost time. It's about the crushing, paralyzed weight of trying to fix an entire life in a single day, rather than just fixing the next morning. That moment, that feeling of just complete self-inflicted guilt, that's exactly where we're going to start this deep dive. Because if you've ever felt that pressure to go from, 0 productivity to 100% perfection overnight, you know that you're just setting yourself up to fail.
It's almost guaranteed.
Right. So our mission today is really to break that cycle. We're going to look at how you move past that paralyzing regret, not with some huge heroic effort, but by focusing on systems of tiny, consistent improvements.
And that scenario you just described is so common. I think everyone listening can probably relate to that because it hits on this core psychological vulnerability we all have.
Which is what?
We confuse the pain of regret with the need for a massive effort. We feel bad, so we think the solution has to be equally huge and dramatic. That's the 0 to 100 mindset, and it is, hands down, the most destructive way to chase long-term consistency.
It's a trap.
It is. It's a vicious, self-defeating cycle. The expectation of perfection for tomorrow ensures you're going to fail, which just makes the guilt for that night even worse.
So let's start there. Let's dig into that feeling. Why does a 0 day, a perceived wasted day, hurt so much?
Well, I think when you go to sleep with that really heavy regret, the pain isn't just about the tasks you didn't do. It's not the email you didn't send or the chapter you didn't read.
Right. Feels deeper than that.
It is deeper. It hurts because it signifies that you didn't even show up for yourself. Failure, failure implies you tried and you missed. This specific kind of regret often implies you didn't even get to the starting line. It's the pain of not trying.
And the immediate impulse, like my friend, is to try and wipe the slate clean with this heroic plan for the next morning. We feel like we owe this huge debt to our future selves.
That's a perfect way to put it. A debt, and you try to pay it off with this one single massive surge of willpower.
Believing that motivation is going to be there to carry you through.
And that is the fundamental flaw. Relying on massive, unsustainable motivation, it's like trying to heat your home with a firework. You get a spectacular burst and then it's gone. Motivation is a highly fluctuating resource. It's tied to your mood, your sleep, your stress. Everything. So by demanding the 100, we set a standard that when we inevitably miss it, we feel even worse. Instead of accepting a 5% improvement, we demand 1,000%, and then we just fall off the rails completely.
Okay, so if motivation is unreliable and the 100 approach is a trap, what's the psychological shift we need to make? How do we even begin to approach that feeling of regret without just beating ourselves up?
The key is to reframe what regret actually is. We have to move from judgment to diagnosis. And this is where a lot of modern coaching frameworks, and especially principles from internal family systems, or IFS, can give us a really precise lens.
I've heard IFS mentioned a lot recently, especially around burnout and self-leadership. For anyone who isn't familiar, what are we talking about here?
So in the IFS model, the idea is that our psyche is made up of different parts like subpersonalities that hold different feelings, beliefs, and memories. So when you say, "I am actual garbage" at midnight, that's not all of you speaking.
It's a part of me.
It's a part of you. Maybe a manager part or a guilt part. And it's trying desperately to motivate you through shame. IFS suggests that true self-leadership means approaching that part not with anger, but with curiosity and compassion. You try to understand its positive intent.
Which is usually what? To protect you from something.
To protect you from future failure or maybe from criticism. The regret is just a messenger. It's a signal. It's identifying something that wants to be done differently next time.
So instead of seeing that guilt as proof that I'm a failure, I should see it as a learning opportunity.
An enormous learning opportunity. From a coaching perspective, regret signals a clear desire for change. It shows a misalignment between your actions and your deeper values. And when you can acknowledge that part and ask it, what are you worried about? Well, you transform that emotion from a source of paralyzing pain into a source of real clarity and direction.
That's a huge difference. You're changing the internal voice from a prosecutor to a detective.
Exactly. It's a move towards self-leadership. You identify the specific area that needs a little work, and then, and this is the crucial part, you create a new narrative around it. If you let that regret trap you in shame, you're paralyzed. But if you can hold that regretful part of yourself with some respect, if you can sit with it, understand its burden, and see it as a source of vital insight, it's incredibly powerful.
Can we get really specific? Let's say someone is struggling with procrastination on a work project, and it's leading to that midnight guilt trip every single night. How would they actually use this approach?
Okay, great example. So let's say it's a boring monthly report. At 11:49 p.m., that regretful part pipes up. You wasted the whole day. You're so unprofessional.
I think we've all heard that voice.
Right. So instead of just believing it, you turn toward that part internally and you ask it, what are you worried will happen if I don't do the report? And the part might say it's worried about your boss being angry or about failing in your career. That fear of judgment, that's the part's burden.
And how do you unburden it?
You acknowledge its hard work and you promise to take over the responsibility using your core adult self-energy, which is calm and compassionate and clear. Then you pivot immediately to a behavioral fix. And this is the system we're building. Instead of promising, I'll finish the entire report tomorrow, you commit to something tiny.
Like what?
Tomorrow, right after my morning coffee, I will spend just 15 minutes outlining the introduction. That's it.
So the solution isn't just about managing your emotions. It's about acknowledging the emotion and then creating a tiny, concrete plan.
That is it, exactly. You address the emotional fear with compassion, and you provide a small, achievable action with clarity. You're replacing this huge, scary task that the part is terrified of with a non-threatening micro-commitment. You're basically telling that worried part of you, I hear you, I appreciate you, and I'm putting a system in place so we don't have to feel this way again.
That feels like it would rebuild some internal trust.
That's the whole game. It's about rebuilding internal trust, which is the absolute foundation of self-leadership.
But what if that feeling of regret just sticks around? You understand the system intellectually, but that emotional drag is still there.
That's when you have to go a layer deeper with compassion. We often judge our past actions using our present knowledge, right? Why didn't I just get up and do it?
Of course. Hindsight is 20/20.
Right. But you have to step back and apply this sort of radical idea that you're a good person who is constantly learning. If you can approach yourself with real compassion and understand why you acted that way, maybe you were exhausted. Maybe you were dealing with some other stress you forgot about. Maybe you just didn't have the right skill at that moment. You realize the procrastination wasn't about being lazy. It was probably an unmet need.
So the way forward isn't some massive efficiency overhaul tomorrow morning.
No. The antidote to that anxiety isn't cramming more stuff into your day. It's a deliberate, consistent act of self-care that's channeled into a small, non-threatening action. You have to dramatically lower the bar for success so that a win is practically inevitable.
So the promise changes. It's not, I must be perfect tomorrow.
The promise becomes, tomorrow will be better than today, even if it's just 1% better. That 1% is manageable, it's consistent, and most importantly, it starts building momentum immediately, which is something the impossible 100 can never do.
Okay, so once we've done that psychological work of reframing regret, and we've accepted that this 1% approach is the way to go, we need the actual mechanics. We need to build systems that work even when we're tired or overwhelmed or, feeling like garbage.
Exactly. We have to stop relying on that flaky resource we call motivation.
And start relying on what?
On robust systems and habits. The data on this is just crystal clear. Research shows that up to 40% of our daily actions, think about that, 4 out of every 10 things you do today are driven by habit, not conscious decisions.
Wow, 40% is on autopilot. That's a huge chunk of our day.
It's massive, and it's because our brains are desperately trying to conserve energy. Habits are the brain's main tool for reducing decision fatigue. They create these little mental shortcuts that free up our cognitive resources, our executive function, for the hard stuff that actually requires real focus.
So if you have to consciously decide to make coffee or tie your shoes every single morning, you've already wasted your best energy before you've even started your workday.
You've got it. If 40% of your day is on autopilot, the most important strategic decision you can make is to make sure that autopilot is flying you in the right direction.
And to do that, we have to understand how that autopilot works, the neurological pattern that's behind every habit, the habit loop.
Right, the habit loop. It's the foundational framework. It's a simple three-part pattern. You have the cue, which is the trigger or the signal. You have the routine, which is the actual action. And then you have the reward, which is the payoff that reinforces the whole loop.
Okay, so let's break that down. If I want to build a new positive habit, it starts with the cue. It has to be obvious.
It has to be undeniable. The cue can be external, a time of day, a specific location, seeing an object, or it can be internal, like a feeling of anxiety. But to build a new habit, you need to deliberately place a really clear cue in your environment.
For example,
If you want to remember to take your vitamins, don't hide them in a cabinet. Put the bottle right next to your coffee machine. You're programming the coffee machine itself to become the cue for the vitamin routine.
and the routine, the action itself has to be incredibly easy, low friction.
Absolutely. Especially at the beginning. This is where that 1% principle really kicks in. If the routine is too hard, your brain will just default to the path of least resistance, which is usually the old habit, or just doing nothing.
And then finally, the reward. That's what makes it stick, right?
The reward is the most critical part for long-term survival because it reinforces the behavior by releasing dopamine. That dopamine hit is your brain's way of saying, hey, do that again. That was useful. The reward has to follow the routine pretty quickly for your brain to make that connection.
This all comes back to that core idea from habit science, the power of consistency, and this 1% principle. We're always fighting this internal urge to make these huge dramatic changes.
And that urge is a psychological trap. Small, consistent improvements are just overwhelmingly more effective than big, sporadic ones because they build momentum without demanding these huge sacrifices of motivation. It's the compound effect.
Right.
If you can genuinely get just 1% better every day, and that could mean being 1% more organized or 1% more focused, you become 37 times better over a year. That math is just, it's game-changing.
And I want to push back on that for a second, because if I'm a busy professional, reading one single page or stretching for 60 seconds, it can feel like a waste of time. It doesn't feel like a high leverage activity. How do you convince a high achiever that read one page is actually a valuable action?
That's a fantastic question, and it gets to the heart of why high achievers resist this. The reason they resist is a cognitive bias called hyperbolic discounting. Our brains are hardwired to prioritize big, immediate rewards over small, delayed rewards.
So the 100-day feels good now, even if it leads to burnout later.
Precisely. The reward for the 1% effort is almost invisible today. Reading one page doesn't give you any immediate visceral benefit. We are psychologically blind to the power of compounding in the short term.
So what's the trick? How do you override that?
The trick is to teach the brain that the reward isn't the final outcome, like the finished book. The immediate reward is the satisfaction of executing the system. When you read that one page, you earn the right to put a check mark on your habit tracker. That check mark, that's the immediate little dopamine hit of sticking to your system, and that's the reward that anchors the habit.
Ah, okay. So successful people aren't just achieving goals. They're designing systems where the tiny reward reinforces the consistent behavior.
Yes. And you see this compounding effect everywhere, in finance and personal development. Reading just 10 pages a day doesn't feel like much, but that adds up to over 12 books a year. Writing 500 words a day feels totally manageable, but that's a full book draft in 4 months.
So to implement this with as little friction as possible, the foundational technique seems to be habit stacking.
It is the genius move because it bypasses decision fatigue completely. You're just linking a new small habit to an existing reliable routine. We call that the anchor habit. You're essentially borrowing the momentum from a behavior you already do without thinking.
And the simple formula for that is?
Well, what was it? The formula for clarity is, after my current anchor habit, I will mail my new small habit. The reason this works so well for busy people is the old habit acts as the perfect automatic cue. You don't have to decide when to do the new thing.
And the anchor has to be something that's totally non-negotiable and automatic.
Absolutely. Something you do every single day, no matter what. Brushing your teeth, pouring your coffee, plugging in your phone at night. Those are rock-solid anchors.
So some examples of stacks.
Sure. If you want to improve flexibility, after I take off my shoes when I come home, anchor, I will hold a 60-second hamstring stretch, new habit. If you want to drink more water, after I open my laptop in the morning, anchor. I will immediately drink a glass of water. New habit. It connects the existing cue to the desired action instantly.
And this all feeds into that bigger framework, the 4 laws of behavior change. We have to make a habit obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying.
That's the operational manual. Make it obvious is all about designing your environment. If you want to practice guitar, don't keep it in a closet, put it on a stand in the middle of your living room. You make the cues impossible to ignore.
And to break a bad habit, you do the opposite. You make the cue invisible.
Exactly. Get the junk food out of the house. Put your phone in another room while you work.
Okay, second law, make it attractive. This sounds like tying it to something you actually want to do.
It is. It's often called temptation bundling. You link the habit you need to do with something you want to do. For example, I only get to listen to my favorite podcast while I'm doing the dishes. The craving for the podcast is what pulls you into doing the chore.
And the third law, make it easy. This seems like where the 1% principle really lives. It's all about reducing friction.
It is the bedrock of consistency, and it's where most people fail because they ask too much of themselves too soon. You have to reduce the friction to start. The 2-minute rule is perfect for this.
Right, from BJ Fogg.
Yes. Start with a habit that takes 2 minutes or less. If your goal is to exercise for an hour, the 2-minute version is put on my workout clothes.
Why is that 2-minute start so important?
Because the goal is not to achieve peak performance. The goal is just to show up. Momentum is created by successful starting, not by successful finishing. Once your shoes are on, you often find the motivation to keep going. But if you demand a 60-minute workout from the get-go, your brain will fight you at the starting line.
And finally, make it satisfying. This is about that immediate reinforcement loop. You mentioned the dopamine hit. How do we create that satisfaction?
You often have to manufacture it because many good habits, like saving money, have delayed rewards. Visual tracking is one of the most powerful tools. Using a physical calendar or an app to mark off every day you complete your micro habit that provides an immediate, tangible, satisfying reward.
You don't want to break the chain.
You don't want to break the chain. That desire to keep the streak going is a powerful, short-term, instant reward that strengthens the long-term habit.
Okay, so we have the psychology, we have the mechanics. Let's really bring this home and look at how it applies in specific high-stakes professional environments. Let's start with the entrepreneur or the freelancer. They have all this ambition, but no external structure, which can lead to paralysis.
Oh, it's a huge pressure point. When you are the boss, the employee, and the one setting the deadlines, that ambiguity can be absolutely crushing. You see, brilliant entrepreneurs get stuck because they're demanding a masterpiece from themselves right out of the gate.
And then that leads to that devastating daily regret because every day they don't produce feels like a massive failure.
Exactly. We saw this with a graphic designer we can call Liam. He was incredibly talented, but he was paralyzed by the pressure to create the perfect portfolio website. Every time he opened his design software, he just felt the weight of that impossible goal, and he'd end up procrastinating. Classic regret loop.
So how did he break that cycle with this tiny victory approach?
He just fundamentally lowered the bar for what success looked like each day. He stopped making his goal about the outcome, finished the website, and made it about the commitment to the system.
What was the new commitment?
His new rule was just open the laptop and design for 30 minutes. That's it. He was even encouraged to stop after 30 minutes, no matter how good or bad the work was.
And that worked.
It was revolutionary for him. By defining success as just showing up for 30 minutes, the fear of failure it evaporated. He wasn't relying on motivation for a marathon session. He was just making this tiny, consistent commitment. And of course, sometimes those 30 minutes turned into 2 hours when he got into a flow state. But the momentum started small. 3 months later, he had a finished, high-quality portfolio.
That idea of psychological momentum feels really key, and it ties right into the corporate world, too, especially this struggle against burnout and what's called revenge bedtime procrastination.
It is the dark side of a demanding corporate life. You spend 12 hours pouring all of your energy into your company's goals, and by the time you get home, you feel like you've done nothing for yourself. So to reclaim some personal time, you stay up late scrolling or binge watching, sacrificing sleep, which just makes you more exhausted and full of regret the next day.
It's self-sabotage, but it's driven by a real need for autonomy.
A very legitimate need. We saw this with a senior marketing director, let's call him Marcus. He was stuck in that exact spiral. He realized he needed a non-negotiable psychological interrupt pattern during his day that would prove to his brain he still had some agency.
And he used habit stacking to do it.
He did. He identified his strongest anchor habit, his 10:0 a.m. coffee run, so he created a non-negotiable stack. After I get my coffee from the office kitchen, anchor, I will take it to go and walk outside for exactly 15 minutes, new habit, with my phone on silent in my pocket.
So this wasn't really about fitness. A 15-minute walk is not much.
Not at all. This was not a fitness initiative. This was an act of psychological reclamation. Marcus's brain had been trained to believe that every minute of his day belonged to the company. That 15-minute phone-free walk proved that he still owned a small, non-negotiable piece of his own time and attention. It was a micro-victory for his autonomy.
And what was the downstream effect? How did that morning walk change his evenings?
Well, because he'd already established that precedent of self-care in the morning, the evening regret was lessened. He found he had a little more mental bandwidth to make a better choice. Instead of just scrolling until 2 a.m., he started stacking onto an evening anchor.
Which was?
After the dinner dishes are put away, anchor, I will sit down with my professional certification textbook and read for 30 minutes, new habit. That 15-minute morning walk was the tiny catalyst that shifted his entire mindset. It let him build a low-friction system where his self-care and his personal development became automatic.
That principle is so applicable to anyone who works at a desk all day, right? Where you have fatigue, eye strain.
Yeah.
You need those physical interrupts. Habit stacking seems perfect for integrating those little micro breaks.
It's the ideal method. Micro breaks, these little informal breaks under 10 minutes, are scientifically proven to restore energy. But people forget to take them, or they feel guilty about it. Habit stacking gives you that needed guilt-free structure.
So give us some really specific examples. Micro stacks that you can blend right into a busy workday.
Okay, you need anchors that happen multiple times a day. So you could have a login anchor. After I log into my computer in the morning, I will stand up and do 3 rounds of box breathing for 90 seconds. That centers you before the day's chaos begins.
I like that. What about after meetings?
A great one, the meeting anchor. After any video call ends, I will stand up and stretch my shoulders and neck for 60 seconds. It just breaks that posture lock from staring at a screen. Or the email anchor. After I close my email client, I will stand up and refill my water bottle. Forces movement and hydration.
These are tiny, sub-2-minute movements.
They're tiny, but their impact is huge. Studies show that these integrated micro breaks can boost your energy, reduce stress hormones, and increase feelings of vigor by up to 60%. By stacking them onto automatic behaviors, you prevent that catastrophic mid-afternoon slump that leads to poor choices later.
This journey from individual regret to consistent momentum is really clear. But as you mentioned, this isn't just a personal failing. This whole issue of relying on these big bursts of effort and then burning out, it scales up, right? It becomes a systemic organizational crisis.
Oh, absolutely. It's a full-blown systemic crisis, and the numbers are just alarming. Something like 83% of software developers report experiencing significant burnout in their careers. This isn't just about personal stress management. It's an organizational health issue that tanks code quality, increases technical debt, and just suffocates innovation.
And the root causes go beyond just overwork. You mentioned this idea of skill proliferation.
That cognitive overload is crushing. A developer today isn't just writing code. They're expected to be an expert in security, cloud architecture, data modeling, business analysis, all at the same time. And on top of that, many organizations are still measuring the wrong things.
Like what?
They're still using these vanity metrics to measure productivity lines of code, number of commits, hours logged. It's a perverse feedback loop that pushes teams to prioritize speed over quality, and it erodes motivation because people feel like their best, most careful work goes unrecognized.
So how does this philosophy of tiny 1% improvements translate into an organizational strategy that can actually fight that kind of systemic burnout?
It scales through a really profound framework called Kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese term. It means continuous improvement, but it's more than just a technique. It's a foundational mindset where all employees are actively encouraged to find areas for small, incremental enhancements in their work processes.
I've always associated Kaizen with manufacturing, like the Toyota assembly line. How is that relevant for a modern knowledge work team?
In a knowledge economy, Kaizen focuses on low-cost, rapid-cycle improvements to internal processes. It's not about some massive, expensive re-engineering project. It's about small changes suggested by the people doing the work. For a tech team, a Kaizen suggestion isn't rewrite the entire code base. It's Let's standardize our naming convention for pull requests to save 2 minutes on every review.
So it empowers people at the ground level.
It does. It tells employees, you're not just a cog in the machine. You are the expert on your process, and your small ideas matter. That sense of ownership over the system, not just the output, is incredibly restorative.
That seems critical to overcoming that feeling of organizational regret, the sense that the system is just broken no matter how hard you work.
Exactly. We saw this with a team leader named Sarah. Her developers were constantly feeling like any day they didn't ship a major feature was a wasted day, so she applied the 1% philosophy directly to their team meetings. She changed one question in their daily stand-up meeting. Instead of the typical high-pressure, what did you finish yesterday? She started asking, what is one tiny thing we improved yesterday or plan to improve today?
And what kinds of things did they report?
They were deliberately microscopic. One day, a developer said, we refactored a clumsy bit of code to make it 15 lines shorter and easier to read. Another said, we removed one redundant field from our testing documentation. Someone else said, we're designating the last 5 minutes of this meeting for open feedback on our process.
And the result of that shift?
It was profound. It created this culture of continuous effort that insulated the team from that feeling of futility. The narrative shifted from, we're always behind schedule, to, we're getting demonstrably sharper and more efficient every single day.
But for that to work, for Kaizen to actually thrive, you need something else, don't you? You need a foundation of trust.
You need a foundation of psychological safety. This is the concept, coined by Harvard's Amy Edmondson, that describes a work environment where people feel safe enough to express concerns, admit mistakes, and take risks without fear of being punished or humiliated.
So you can't have one without the other, right? People won't suggest small improvements if they're afraid of being criticized for pointing out a flaw.
That's the synergy. Kaizen requires vulnerability. If the environment is punitive, people will stay silent to protect themselves. But psychological safety encourages that open dialogue. It allows employees to acknowledge errors early, which is vital for learning. When leaders model that vulnerability themselves by admitting their own mistakes, they reinforce that trust. Without safety, Kaizen is superficial. With it, continuous learning gets baked into the team's DNA.
So beyond the culture, organizations need proactive strategies to deal with this cognitive overload. You mentioned we need to stop measuring the wrong things.
Absolutely. The first step is to just abandon those problematic output metrics like lines of code. They promote rushed work, and they fail to capture the high-value work of debugging, refactoring, and planning. You have to shift to outcome-based metrics that measure actual business value and systemic health.
What are some examples of those better outcome-based metrics?
We should look at the metrics from DevOps research, which measure stability and flow, not just raw volume. Things like deployment frequency, how often do you successfully release code, or mean time to resolution, how quickly can the team recover from a failure.
Okay, so you're incentivizing quality and resilience, not just speed.
Exactly. And another one is change failure rate. What percentage of your changes result in a failure? Lowering that rate encourages careful, high-quality development. These metrics shift the focus from how much did you type to how resilient is our system, and that reduces the psychological burden on everyone.
And it seems like technology itself can help manage some of this overload, right?
Yes, through intelligent workload management. Traditional manual task assignment just doesn't scale anymore. It leads to burnout for your best people. But forward-thinking organizations are now using AI-driven resource allocation systems.
How does that work in practice?
Think of it like a smart traffic control system. An AI system can analyze historical patterns, project status, individual skill sets, and current capacity to optimize task distribution dynamically. It prevents any single person from becoming perpetually overloaded.
So it's about augmenting human judgment with objective data.
Right. And some teams using this tech are reporting up to 30% improved resource utilization and much higher job satisfaction because the work distribution feels fair and predictable. It prevents cognitive overload before it even happens.
So the final piece of this puzzle then has to be leadership. Leaders have to model these healthy boundaries.
They absolutely have to. Sustainable practices need to be the default culture, not a special exception. Leaders have to use their authority to build systems that protect human capacity. That means things like establishing protected deep work blocks with no meetings.
Right. It means defining clear core collaboration hours and setting clear emergency escalation procedures so people don't feel like they have to be on 247. The best organizations understand that human creativity and focus are their greatest assets. By adopting a systems-based approach, from the 1% principle for individuals all the way up to Kaizen and smart metrics for the organization, they create an environment where success isn't dependent on heroic, unsustainable effort. It becomes automatic and effortless.
So we started this deep dive in the shadow of that 11:59 p.m. moment, with that paralyzing guilt and that urge to fix everything at once with an impossible 100-day. And what we've learned is that this massive overhaul impulse is a setup for guaranteed failure.
It relies on the flaky currency of motivation.
Right. And our whole exploration has shown that lasting change, whether it's personal, professional, or organizational, is not built on those sporadic, massive efforts. It is built entirely on deliberate systems that favor small, consistent actions. Yeah. Whether you're habit stacking a 60-second stretch after you check your email, or you're using a framework like IFS to reframe regret as insight, or celebrating a 1% process improvement with your team, the power is always in that low-friction, high-consistency behavior.
The key to long-term success isn't one-time effort or motivation. It is the meticulous, quiet accumulation of tiny victories that make sustained progress inevitable.
By focusing on designing robust, low-friction systems, you create an environment where success becomes not a struggle but automatic and effortless.